Welcome to Broadcast Map, the show that covers the world of broadcasting, the Canadian media landscape, sports media, the show's favorite sports teams, as well as news and politics. Here's your host, Ali Musa.
Good afternoon. On Thursday, July 17th, 2025. I have the pleasure today of being joined by Ian Hunter, who kicks off our trade deadline coverage here on the show. And you can find Ian at Blue Jay Hunter on X. Ian, I want to take this opportunity to welcome you to the show again. And are you on Blue Sky yet?
I am, actually, yeah. Same handle. I forget how you kind of mentioned that, but Blue Jay Hunter as well. You can find me there too.
Perfect. Yes, and yes. So feel free to give me a follow there as well at Broadcast Map.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yes, and let's first. I want to start with a recap here. Your thoughts on the first half of the season? So, of the season, the Jays had that run there where they won like 10 in a row. What was your thoughts starting there, and then you can kind of assess the first half overall.
Sure. I mean, I think if I had to use one word to describe the first half for the Blue Jays, I would say overperformed. I think they exceeded expectations. I can't remember a person who thought they had a chance at snagging the division lead for a day, let alone for going into the All-Star break, having a 2-game cushion here as we kick off the second half. So, yeah, it's been a lot of surprises from unheralded players, or maybe players that people had kind of written off, like George Springer. I assumed going into this year, I foolishly said, oh, the Blue Jays are probably going to release him because he had such a poor season last year and he had an abysmal spring training. There was no signs that he was coming out of it. Alejandro Kirk, he's always been a pretty good defensive catcher, but his bat has really trailed off the last couple of years, but that's come back. And then you have Ernie Clement, who's kind of really carved out a spot on this roster now, and role players like Nathan Lucas and as of late Davis Schneider. Funny enough, we're not mentioning any of the big guys here like Bo Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., or the team's biggest offseason signing, Anthony Santander. So, you've been having okay seasons from Bo and Vlad. You've got nothing from Santander. Scherzer's only made a handful of starts, and yet they are somehow 14 games above 500 and 2 games up in the division. I didn't have this on my bingo card. I don't think anybody did. And I think if you're a Jays fan, it's a real pleasant surprise right now.
Absolutely, and it makes and it also makes like listening to some of those Blue Jays centric podcasts, like Blair and Barker and At the Letters and then the Walk Off as well. It makes it more interesting when the team is winning.
Yeah, I can kind of go both ways. I think I don't know if it's a Toronto sports thing, but I think last year, from a fan perspective, wasn't all that entertaining, but sometimes people love to watch things burn, right? So it's when a team is performing poorly, sometimes they revel in that. And not that I'm saying that's fun, but sometimes it's interesting to kind of hear and listen to that. But yeah, this year it's like you can't put out enough Blue Jays content. Like, people are just ravenous for it right now. And the difference this year is that in past years, it was always kind of a foregone conclusion. Maybe the best this team could do would be the first wild card, but they're contending for a division title for the first time since 2016, I believe. So, I mean, they've got a legitimate shot here. It's just in previous years, either the Yankees or the Rays or the Orioles were just running away with the division at the end of the first half. This year, they've got a decent shot to make it and not just get into the postseason, but hopefully win some series and win some games.
Yeah, and there was also sort of that incident that, like, there was that at the last game before the All-Star break. There was the whole John Schneider thing, and he had something to do. I didn't quite understand what happened. Maybe can you just walk us through what happened there?
Sure. So the Athletics, as they're called.
I do that too.
They're playing in Sacramento right now, which is a minor league ballpark. Davis Schneider hit a ball that was kind of down the foul line. It was really hard to tell on replay whether it was a home run or whether it was a foul ball, but the umpire called it a foul. John Schneider challenged that call, and it ended up staying. So John Schneider was livid. I don't know if he was just doing that to kind of fire up his team and spark a rally, but yeah, he got ejected, and probably one of the funniest ejections I've seen. The picture of him walking off the field to the left field fence and then gesturing that it was a fair ball, I thought that was pretty hilarious. And then, of course, the very next pitch, Davis Schneider hits a home run anyway. So it was all a moot point. But yeah, it was kind of disappointing to see the Jays lose 3 out of their last 4 heading into the All-Star break, especially after they rattle off that 10-game win streak. And you've got a team like the Boston Red Sox nipping at your heels. They've now won 10 straight games. Yankees aren't far behind at 2 games. And Tampa Bay Rays are further down. But, you've still got 4 potential playoff teams in the American League East, which, again, I couldn't have foreseen. It's always been a strong division, but this year, it's probably, I would say, maybe the best in baseball.
For Max Scherzer there, do you feel like did the Jays know what they were what they were going to get from him when they signed him? Because he hasn't played that much, and then of course in his first outing of the regular season there, he did have that finger issue, and he still played through it.
Yeah, I don't know if they expected him to be sidelined for, what was it, almost 3 months, but it was definitely a gamble. And I'm always of the belief that there's no such thing as a bad 1-year contract, right? Like, even if that was it for Max Scherzer and the Jays didn't get anything else from him, it's just money, right? It's just, I think he signed for $15 million or whatever it is, which, for some of these small market teams, that's a lot of money. But for the Jays, who are a top 5 payroll, that's peanuts. So, yeah, I don't know if they expected to get a full season out of him. I always thought, if you get maybe 15 starts out of him, that would be decent. I know he's already got 5 under his belt, and hopefully he has a healthy second half. So at this pace, you would hope that maybe he gets up to the 20 start mark. I'm interested to see what the Blue Jays do at the trade deadline here, because the biggest hole on this roster to me is starting pitching, followed by bullpen. So if you add a starter, does that bump Max Scherzer from the rotation? Does that bump Eric Lauer from the rotation? It'll be interesting to see kind of how they navigate that. But as of now, the Jays have, knock on wood, 5 healthy starters, which they didn't have for most of the first half. So it's actually interesting to see them roll out post All-Star break with 5 half decent starters here.
So now the all-important trade deadline. The poll question here is, will they be buyers at the trade deadline, or shall we say, are they going to try and sell off some pieces to buy? What do you think?
If you asked me this, I believe earlier this season, I wrote a piece for Blue Jays Nation about how, like, the pros and cons of trading Chris Bassett, for example, because he was having a really strong start to the season. At the time, I believe the Blue Jays were under 500. Things were not looking all that great. And then all of a sudden, they go on this 6-week tear where they're one of the hottest teams in baseball. And I think, unquestionably, they're going to be buyers. I think I've seen reports, and I believe this is to be true, but I think they're going to be extremely aggressive because, unlike previous years, like I said, they're not in the wild card hunt. They're going for a division title here, so they can get that first round bye into the ALDS series. And I think they're probably going to be shopping at the top of the market. unfortunately, there's not unlike previous trade deadlines. Like I know a lot of people are thinking back to 2015, and is there a David Price trade out there? Is there a Troy Tulowitzki trade out there? I don't know if that's the case, but I think the Blue Jays will be really aggressive, whether it's acquiring a starter with term or going out and getting a rental, because they need reinforcements. They absolutely need to not only do that, but by going out and getting top tier players, that weakens your other competitors, right? Like, so if you go out and get a Zach Gallen, that means the Yankees or the Red Sox can't get him. So, I think unquestionably they're going to be buyers. It's a complete and total polar opposite from last year, where they were selling off every single rental player they had, and I think they gave up a few players of term. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa and Nate Pearson were two guys who had additional years of control last year. But yeah, I think if you're a fan, it's much more fun this year because you can kind of circle non-contenders and say, oh, I'd like this player, I'd like that player. And more than likely, some of these guys are going to be Blue Jays in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and I have to say, for me, after the Stanley Cup playoffs ended, I was completely into I've been completely into the Jays, and I think that and I felt that happened at the right time.
Yeah, I've heard that sentiment from a lot of people, just because I think the tide shifted maybe just ahead or during that Yankee series where the Jays swept them at Rogers Center. I didn't think they had a chance to do that. I thought maybe if they split that series, that's a half decent outcome, but that's kind of what spurred their winning streak. And when you're winning in any manner of ways, it just makes it much more exciting to watch. And there was a bunch of walk-off wins in there too. So it kind of felt like the Blue Jays of old, where it didn't feel like a deficit was insurmountable. Whereas last year, the Jays go down 3 runs in the first inning and you're like, well, this game's basically over.
Yep.
I got that feeling earlier this season, but suddenly I think they're a much more well-balanced lineup, and they do have the potential to kind of break out at any given moment.
Yeah, and I mean the other sort of piece kind of becomes as well, where you sort of have that, like, I think it's because now, see, for me, like, and you know this, I'm a big Blue Jays fan. I'm a big MLB and NHL fan too, right? So I'm a big fan I like to see how everybody's doing. Now, kind of circling back to the trade deadline, to the trade here. What about a Freddie Freeman? If the Braves decide to do a sell-off, could he be a piece the Jays could target?
Well, Freeman's on the Los Angeles Dodgers right now. So
my apologies.
Yeah, so I would put the odds.
He was with the Braves at one point.
Yeah, a few years ago. The Jays were there was rumors that the Jays were not just interested in him, but pretty close to signing him a few years ago. But yeah, he ultimately went to the Dodgers, and he's staying put for sure.
Yeah, and what about if the Braves do that sell-off? I mean, who do you think could be could the Jays be interested? Do you think are there any names there that could be of interest?
I mean, off the top of my head, it's just kind of it's a pipe dream right now. But I think Ronald Acuna Jr. would be a really interesting piece. Every team would love to have him. Former MVP, multiple-time All-Star. But I believe I read reports that the Braves are kind of like the Blue Jays last year, where they're not interested in selling off guys who have multiple years of control. So it sounds like they're just going to be selling off their rentals. So in a case like that, if I'm looking at the Braves roster, Marcell Ozuna is one potential option. Right-handed bat, can hit for power, can play the outfield. That might be a nice addition for the Blue Jays, just to give some more length to the lineup and add a veteran bat there. Aside from that, looking at this roster of the Braves, Grant Holmes is another option. He's a pitcher he could be a possibility, but yeah, outside of that, there's not a ton of options there on the Braves. I think it's really going to depend what happens over the next few weeks here, right? Like we've got a lot of teams that are kind of on the bubble of contention. The Orioles have kind of righted the ship a little bit, even though they're still 7.5 games out. You've got teams like the Angels, Twins, Royals. They're all kind of in the 4-ish games back, kind of echelon there. And then the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Cincinnati Reds are two interesting teams to watch. I think the D-backs are going to be sellers. I'm not so sure about the Reds, but if another team goes on like a 5-game losing streak heading into July 31st, all of a sudden their playoff odds become that much lower. So it's the chances of them selling are probably pretty high. And I think if you're Ross Atkins and you're fielding phone calls and trying to make trades here, I think it's changing by the day. So really depends on what these other teams do over the next couple of weeks.
Will this outcome of both the trade deadline and the season will this determine the futures of both Atkins and Shapiro? If you ask me that question, I will say 100% it does, and I wouldn't see them, and we cannot expect them back next year. If it doesn't end up going the way that we're expecting it to be.
Yeah, it's tough to say. Like I can't remember. It's either Mark or Ross's contract is up at the end of next year, and then the other is done in 2026. So we're at a point here where one or those, but maybe both of those guys are looking at a contract extension. If they crash and burn this year, do I think they're both out? I'm not 100% confident in that, because I thought a few years ago, after the flame out in the AL wildcard series with the Twins, I thought that was kind of a spot where you would make a GM change. Maybe not a manager. I mean, you could have made a manager change after that. But I thought a GM change was, warranted after that series, and it didn't happen. We didn't get one last year, even though the Blue Jays finished in last place and they were sellers at the trade deadline instead of buyers. So I don't want to say Mark and Ross are protected, but I think they do have the backing to stick around here. And like if they don't make the postseason this year, maybe their jobs are going to come into question. But if it's another case where it's a first round exit or a second round exit, I think their jobs are probably safe. It seems like in Toronto sports, I don't know how many GM president changes there have been with the Leafs, but it feels like there's been quite a few changes with them as of late compared to the Blue Jays, which, this regime has now been in place for 10 years. So hasn't been a ton of change. I feel like something drastic would have to happen for things to unravel here for Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro.
Well, in my mind, they will always be together. If one goes, the other's going to go.
Yep. Yeah, I would tend to agree, right? Like they were kind of tied at the hip in Cleveland. And when they came over to Toronto in 2015, 2016, it was like a package deal as well, right? So I don't know if I agree with you, Ali. I couldn't foresee Mark being let go and Ross staying, or vice versa. They're kind of 1A and 1B tied at the hip like that.
It was put to me a few months ago that Ross is Mark's a bit of it's a safety net in some ways.
Yeah, it could be. To me, it sounds like Mark Shapiro is very active on he kind of does things that you would typically defer to the GM, like signings, trades, and whatnot. It sounds like Mark is very involved in stuff like that. So, yeah, again, I think it's a package deal. I think they're safe for now, but as we've seen in Toronto sports, you can have a successful regular season, you can bow out in the first round and still get run out of town. So we'll have to see what happens.
Well, yeah, unless you kind of want to, unless we want to sort of like, and the Brendan Shanahan dismissal is a prime example of that in Toronto sports.
Yep. Yeah, it's exactly it, right? Like perennial regular season success. But then when it comes to the postseason, it's kind of what have you done for me lately, right? And I don't know if that's too reactionary or not. We're kind of seeing both ends of the both ends of the spectrum here, and in terms of Toronto sports, like it seems like the Leafs are very reactionary when it comes to GM coaching, president changes, and the Jays are very kind of hands off. So we'll have to see what happens here.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I'm sort of thinking like, you know what? I mean, they've got like now Chris Bassett. I mean, I think he's looked good so far. I think he's looked really good. But I mean, I think if they replace him or trade him with somebody else, then I mean, if they can get something decent for him, then I think the team will be okay.
Yeah, if there's a trade, I don't think a guy like Bassett gets bumped from the rotation, even though he's got a 4.12 ERA right now. The Jays are, I believe their starting staff is like 25th in baseball when it comes to starter ERA. So if there were a starting pitcher added to the rotation, I think it would be someone like Eric Lauer or Max Scherzer getting bumped from the rotation. I don't know. Is Chris Bassett like someone you would trust in a playoff start? I think so. Like maybe not a one and done game, but I could see him starting like a game 2 or a game 3. So although his numbers on the whole aren't that great, he's still making the starts. His ERA is around 4. And yeah, he's in a bit of a rough patch right now, but I think having that veteran savvy on the team is still something that the Blue Jays value. So I don't think they would immediately bounce him from the rotation if they added another starter.
Yeah. Well, I'm very, you know what? I feel like it's going to be very exciting, down the stretch here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's more exciting to write pieces about who the Blue Jays should add rather than who the Blue Jays should trade and what prospects they should look forward to getting. Like it's always that end of the pendulum is always way more fun just from my perspective. And I know from a fan perspective too. So, and I know out of the gate here, the Jays have some tough series. Like they had a pretty soft schedule going into the All-Star break with the Angels, the White Sox and the Athletics, but now they're coming out, they're facing the Giants, Yankees at home next week. And then not really too many more layup series here and there. So I think if the Jays want to contend here for this division title, they've really got to come up to their competition and perform well against these teams that are above 500.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hey, have you checked out Whit Merrifield's new podcast with Lindsay Dunn?
Yes, I have. Yeah, it's pretty neat. I always love when you get to kind of hear from players and they talk about the behind the scenes stuff. So definitely would recommend giving that a listen. 6-inning stretch is what it's called. So if you always want to hear what the Blue Jays were like in that, I believe it was 2022 when the Jays acquired him, 2022, 2023 era. Whit always has some good stories. I believe Matt Chapman was one of their latest guests. So it was kind of cool to hear from him and what he talked about his time in Toronto too.
Oh, I should ask you, did you have a chance to listen to the very first episode? Where Whit was kind of just talking about him, like they were just talking about him, and it was funny. And then they went into some behind the scenes kind of stuff, and I thought it was really funny. I don't know if you got to the end of that, close to the end, but where they talked about the Tim Mesa song that they came up with.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, that was precisely what I was listening for. And you heard the story about how they had the really rough plane ride, and they kind of that incident kind of galvanized the team, and they thought they were going to be a World Series contender after that. But yeah, I love that story. And it also gives a context to a couple years ago when the Jays clinched a playoff spot. There was cameras in the Blue Jays clubhouse, and there's a shirtless Jordan Romano saying, Tim is gonna die. And now if you listen to that podcast, you know what the backstory on that is, because when I first heard it, I thought, why would your teammates want you to perish? So now we know it's all kind of in fun because they're playing a game Mafia, which I guess is pretty popular in professional sports.
Yeah. Well, Ian, I'm really looking forward to, doing I'm really looking forward again to doing like an off-season check-in show as well with you. And you know what? You're always very generous with your time, and I always appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, glad to do it. It's crazy. We're talking about off-season already, and we're only at the All-Star break, but it'll be here before we know it. And time flies when you're having fun, and when you're a Jays team, you're 14 games above 500, 2 games leading the division. It certainly makes things a lot more fun and easier to watch. So it's been cool so far.
Absolutely. And of course, I've got a stretch of shows coming up as well. I'll be back on air tomorrow afternoon at actually the same time, when we'll be talking all about broadcasting with Amanda Shikarchi, and we'll be tuned in for that. We'll be listening in, and we talked about the trade deadline coverage. So on July 29th at 11 a.m. Eastern, we will be doing part 2 of the trade deadline coverage with Scott Belford, host of the Walk Off podcast. So we've got some amazing content coming up here, and some hockey stories as well. So stick around here to the Broadcast Map Network.
Thank you so much for listening and/or watching Broadcast Map. To learn more about the show, please visit broadcastmap.ca. While you're there, subscribe to the newsletter so you never miss an update. Besides, it's free. Enter your email address and hit subscribe right on the homepage and at the bottom of all